Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you here at this 19th International Leadership Association Global Conference. A warm welcome in Brussels. My name... Thank you. Well, that was exactly the icebreaker that we needed. My name is Jorrit Volkers, and I'm the honor of being your conference chair for the inspiring days ahead. 2 years ago, so I'm now a 3-star general, 2 years ago I attended my first ILA conference under the chair of Michael Brandenburg in Barcelona. I had the privilege of giving a keynote speech together with the ILA honorary member, Professor Gil Robertson-Hickman. It was an exciting debut for me, and especially for my organization, Deloitte University, and I hope you are all very happy with the app. Our theme in Brussels is leadership in turbulent times. Turbulence is often hard to predict. As a private person, I experienced this only 3 weeks after our ILA conference in Barcelona, when I suffered a very serious hemorrhage, and without dramatizing, I nearly died. I spent weeks here in Brussels in the hospital, but I recovered. This personal turbulence affected me both as a human being and as a leader. It has given me a fresh impulse and a fresh impetus to accept that anything in life is possible, and that life is about creating, grasping, and enjoying new chances, personally and professionally. Being here with so many leaders from various continents and various backgrounds with a shared focus on leadership is such a chance. It makes me feel even more fortunate and proud to be here. Of course, please give me a call in 3 weeks' time to inform about my health. As Dean of Deloitte University EMEA, I'm very much looking forward to this conference. I'm deeply interested in what we will hear and learn about leadership in our turbulent times, and about possible new mergers of theory and practice. For us, as Deloitte University, the ILA Global Conference in Barcelona was a very fruitful contribution. One of our important missions at Deloitte University is to help our people develop their leadership. My conversations with Professor Gil Hickman, my keynote in Barcelona, and reading of her book, Leading Organizations, became the starting point of our leadership project, where we merged theory and practice. My aim is to shape leadership learning for our people at all levels, not based on one leadership framework, but on multiple theories and practices. Not a rigid system, but agile, with permanent possibility to adapt to change. We believe that we as a professional service firm can offer our practitioners a chance to be better, broader, and therefore happier as leaders. The ILA conference in Barcelona triggered a regional Deloitte project that now has evolved into a global Deloitte project. That means that we have expanded our leadership project from 95,000 to 260,000 practitioners. Conversations, listening to and being inspired by each other can really make a change happen. This project will help us to create even better leaders for Deloitte and for society, fulfilling our global vision to make an impact that matters. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud that you all took the effort to travel to Brussels. Organizers, conference partners, speakers and delegates. I'm also very proud that we have a full house, a great program and a wonderful lineup like in Atlanta last year. The theme that binds us all is leadership in turbulent times, and it has proven highly and globally relevant over and over again. From the United States to North Korea, and from Spain to Germany and to the United Kingdom and Germany and Turkey. And we just learned that the US will leave UNESCO, and I think that is again something that is really applying to leadership in turbulent times. Leadership in turbulent times is more important than ever. I hope that in the coming days you will take up the challenge to listen, share, participate, network and inspire each other, maybe to create, grasp and enjoy new chances. To introduce this conference more in depth, it's my privilege to welcome a key person in the ILA on the stage, and that is our own CEO and President, Cynthia Cherrey. And be a bit nice to her, because we bet around the number of participants, and that gives me a bottle of wine. But she will tell you the exact number. She lost.
Well, thank you, Jorrit. It's always a pleasure to work with Jorrit, and one of the key lessons that we've learned here at the ILA is that you can go from being a keynote to being our conference chair. So Herman van Rompuy, we're looking forward to you being our conference chair in the future sometime. Thanks. One of the things I just really want to also extend on behalf of the ILA to welcome you to Brussels. This is a city where people from across the globe convene and connect, right? The synchronicity of choosing this site and the theme, leadership in turbulent times, all before the terrorist attack in this beautiful city of Brussels. It almost feels prescient. And the theme demands of all of us to be bold in our thinking and our actions. And so here we are all of us, all 1,001 of us from 53 countries. And and Jorrit shared a number of places, but we come from everywhere, from Chile to China, from India to Indonesia, from Kenya to Korea, from Pakistan to Peru, from every country in the EU, including Great Britain. All of us are here in Brussels, an international center of politics and arts and diplomacy and education. So here we are all in Brussels, right? It's like standing in the front yard of our global home. And if you step inside, you get this panoramic view of the world. It opens up before your very eyes. And what you may see is all of its joys, its problems, its challenges, its opportunities. It's exciting and it's terrifying. But all you have to do is take that first uncomfortable step of walking through the front door. Because Brussels offers to all of us a glimpse into, and perhaps an insider's view of this globalizing world of ours in turbulent times. Every day in this world, political realities are unfolding in countries around the globe, and we struggle to ensure that the abnormal does not become normal to us. Violence and terrorism continues to fester and grow, and we are challenged not to become numb to the relentless violence surrounding us. We live in turbulent times. It's a time of stark contrasts and accelerated evolution in which some of us want to hold on to the present, and some of us even want to go back into the past. But what is needed, however, is a fundamental change towards co-creating this new global home of ours in this ever increasingly interdependent global home. There is no going back. We are navigating the uncertain waters of migration and mobility, global trends in finance and big data, technology-driven job loss and job growth, governments facing huge declines in trust and respect. All these areas are intertwined: the political, the social, the environment, technology, and the economy. It's like a huge ball of string that keeps getting larger and larger. So it might be easy to conclude from the recent events that we are seeing the end of globalization. Liberal democracies are being challenged all around the world. We've seen this in countries, right? Like Britain and France and the US and Austria and Australia. They've all been experiencing growing tendencies towards nationalism. And yet, over the past decades, we've also seen, and the world has witnessed, a massive opening of borders to trade. So in their pursuit of greater domestic prosperity, governments are viewed and have viewed their role more as architects of global trade. So this system we call the economy, right? The way we extract and produce, transport, and consume, which now is a mega economy, dominates our global society. And so I want to share with you just one glimpse into this global economy, this mega economy, and it's a global market for imported goods. So here's a map from the UN Comtrade that shows where the goods originate and where they went. Each dot represents $1 billion. Each color represents a different form of trade. So for example, blue dots are food, orange dots are transportation. Each one is different. Besides being quite mesmerizing, it shows how active trade is around the globe and how the import-export trade is concentrated really in 3 main areas around the globe. If you look at China, it's like this octopus with its tentacles wrapped around the globe. If you look at the US, it has fairly equal trade, import-export, between its north and its south neighbors, and then extends beyond around the world. And if you look at Europe, Germany, the UK, and France dominate the global trade, with Germany being that #1 exporter of to 17 of the EU countries. So economies have benefited hugely from global trade. However, it's also true that not everyone benefits from globalization. The older, less skilled population have seen their opportunities diminish because of globalization. Younger professionals that are more skilled are benefiting with greater opportunities, but have struggled with suppressed wages. So what we are witnessing is a new role for governments. What Mansour Yavdan and I framed in our article, a reframing of globalization. Because instead of focusing on opening borders, governments are being pressured to focus on helping those who have not benefited from globalization. So as a result, rather than seeing an end of globalization, we are witnessing an evolution in the role of governments, where they will become more aggressive in encouraging foreign investment and in supporting their local economies. It's paradoxical and it's complex. It's leadership in turbulent times. Because in the 20th century, we had increasingly complicated problems. In the 21st century, we have increasingly complex systems that amplify problems. So today, leading is exponentially more difficult and challenging than leading was in the past. Leaders face an ever more interdependent and demanding globalizing world, and we need to find better ways of understanding leadership and its meaning in the 21st century. The study of global leadership is really quite new. It's a fairly new field of research. We have some data, right, from the World Economic Forums, from the United Nations, and in leadership in particular, some global study projects such as the GLOBE Project and the Global Literacy Studies Project, just to name a few. The research varies, of course, but in general, there is a focus on capabilities that are related to having a global perspective or a global mindset, or what I would call global acuity, which is this understanding and the experiences and insights of living, leading, and working in a global society. Many of us know this is important, but it's hard work to develop a global understanding. One of our ILA members, the Center for Creative Leadership, in a research study in 2009, found that 86% of the senior executives believe it's important to work effectively across cultural and geographic borders. And yet only 7% believe they are effective at doing so. So at the ILA itself, we have this group that is really fairly globally active. Right? In a member survey that we did in 2016, our members shared with us one data point was that 54% of all of you work in two or more countries, with 13% working in over 6 countries. Okay? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, this is my first time out of my country. Or you may be thinking to yourself, I work with a program that is focused on leadership development in my local community. I don't need a global perspective. Well, today that is simply not true. Because in this hyper-connected world of ours, no matter where you live, what you do, what your work is, having a global mindset is essential. Because a global mindset, one of the important aspects, it's about seeing the connections and making the connections. It's seeing how the individual who you are working with is connected to the organization and how the organization is connected to other organizations. It's about how your local community is located in a region which is within a country and so on. The boundaries are blurred and permeable. The local context is part of a larger context. It's like all nested, like Russian dolls, one in another. Today's leadership requires an understanding of multiple and diverse cultures, engaging and influencing those different from ourselves, and searching out diverse perspectives. Because we may be more connected, but that does not mean we are well-versed in the diversity of the world. The world may be flat in terms of technology and interconnectivity, but it is still quite bumpy in the sense that people in different organizations, in different areas of the world, work in very different ways. So we need to find ways to continue to learn, to expand our understanding of others, and ways to influence individuals and organizations that may be different than us. And yet, with this learning, because this is all about learning, right? It's difficult, it's uncomfortable. But this discomfort can also lead to new awareness and new learnings, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing, new ways of being, all of which in turn can lead to new ways of leading, new ways of thinking about, researching, and practicing leadership. The ILA is a great place to grow your global mindset. The ILA provides this framework, a space for those different from ourselves to come together to develop relationships and networks to promote this deeper understanding of leadership knowledge and practice, and to develop new knowledge for the greater good of individuals and communities worldwide. And in addition to doing our work here at the Global Conference, we do this work virtually, right, through our ILA publications, intersections, the webinars. In a forthcoming ILA publication, for example, on international development, the chapter authors are writing narratives from experienced leaders in international development, describing how they've experienced gender and context and culture and sustainability as drivers. And from these narratives, the book editors are going to develop a new leadership model focused on leading international development projects. It's the cycle of practice to theory to practice. And the ILA was founded on this fundamental belief that those who study leadership should raise their sights beyond the ivory tower. And those who practice leadership need to listen to voices in addition to their own. The ILA is distinctive in that it does its work at the nexus of theory and practice. Theory informs good practice, and practice informs theory. Your example of what Deloitte University is doing is so important. We also do this work through our national and our regional conferences, through bringing professionals together from all different sectors and disciplines and cultures and countries to ask the difficult questions and address the challenges of today and tomorrow. Our work with our partners that bring together the best from across the globe to work on these big questions and initiatives. And this upcoming year, the ILA is very proud and privileged to partner with the Moeller Center at Churchill College and Cambridge University, with NASPA, with the University of South Pretoria, the Center for Responsible Leadership, and the Universidad del Pacifico in Peru, along with our Salzburg Global Seminar colleagues on various programs. Things such as, with a focus on women's economic empowerment, the ILA, along with our Salzburg colleagues, are supporting the World Bank's competition on women's entrepreneurship. The prize winners from around the globe will be recognized at the World Bank Spring Meeting in DC, and the ILA will be there to cheer them on and to extend an invitation to the prize winners to present their ideas if they would like at our regional conferences. And then if you'd like, you can journey with us to Cambridge in May, where the ILA will join our Moeller Center colleagues for the Power of Purpose 2.0, where we will bring together for the second year CEOs and leadership scholars to address the question of how do we know if having purpose makes a difference in business. In late May, you can take the trip to South Africa with us to the University of Pretoria, where we will be addressing the theme of next generation leadership in the ongoing struggle of higher education and migration, and also the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals that future leaders must address. From there, travel to Salzburg in late June to join us with our NASPA colleagues to bring together, again, leadership scholars, university presidents, and vice presidents in a global summit around the question of what do the leadership models of the future look like in the changing, shifting landscape of higher education. And in August, to wrap up the ILA summer journey, join us at the University del Pacifico in Lima, Peru, for a regional conference to examine the dilemmas of leadership in Latin America. Because it's important in this globalizing and turbulent world that the ILA and its members play key roles, pivotal roles, in building bridges of understanding across the globe in our leadership research, our teachings, and our best practices, making the connections to each other, making the connection between people and ideas, making the connections from one network to other networks. It's the power of the partnerships and the networks that we will have this great, what I would call geometric multiplying impact. The impact on individuals, on organizations, on institutions, on communities, on societies. And it starts here in Brussels, if you want to take advantage of this time, in joining with people who are different than yourselves. Now, when you walked in the room and you were greeting old friends and new friends, you may or may not have noticed the music in the background. It was not solely background music. That was music performed by Michael Jones, who's a longtime ILA member. And the music is from one of his CDs called Deep Song. And the music on that CD was composed. It was inspired and composed at prior ILA global conferences when Michael would sit at the piano 15 minutes before our plenaries and would be composing music. The result was this CD called Deep Song. And some of the corresponding words on this CD, I would just like to share with you one phrase. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was song. Deep song is the natural music of the forests, woods, lakes, and hills. Music that will make us rich and make us full. In times of turbulence and sudden change, and when things are falling apart, leaders will be called again to listen to their own deep song. And in the song, to hear the promise upon which a new and more resilient center of gravity can be formed. We are here to listen to each other and to learn from each other. The richness of our learning is through this collective space, stepping into the uncomfortable, being together at this ILA Global Conference, bringing together our diverse voices. So this morning, what I'm doing is suggesting a way to frame our time together here at this conference by listening, by giving ourselves permission to be uncomfortable and to learn from each other. At the close of the conference, one of our ILA board members, Aliane Ubajoro, will serve as our weaver, and she will weave a common core experience together for us to remember and to reflect upon our time together before we go our separate ways on Sunday. So at this global conference, with the theme of leadership in turbulent times, may each of us listen to each other, step into the uncomfortable, learn from each other, listen to our own deep song, and become profoundly more resilient in our leadership and as leaders in these present and future turbulent times. Thank you. Segue. I now have the honor of bestowing one of our Lifetime Achievement Awards. And this is the International Leadership Association's Leadership Legacy Program, which is one of the ways that we honor those individuals who have helped to write our story, really to weave our past and our present and our future together. It's a way for us to recognize and celebrate those who have contributed significantly to the field of leadership and to the profession of leadership. These scholars and thought leaders have made noteworthy lifetime contributions to the study and practice of leadership. And their accomplishments include prominent published works and influential support of the body of leadership knowledge and practice, resulting in significant contributions to the field of leadership studies. We began this program in 2008, and we honored an inaugural class of 6 individuals. And those were Bernie Bass, Warren Menace, James McGregor Burns, who's one of our founders, Francis Hesselbein, Manfred Ketz de Vries, and Joe Rost. Since then, we have honored 24 individuals with the Lifetime Achievement Award. And of the last 2 years, I just would like to acknowledge, in 2015, at the Barcelona Global Conference, we had the distinct honor of recognizing 3 colleagues, Boas Shamir, and then our 2 other founders, our founding mothers, Georgia Sorensen and Lorraine Matuzak. Last year, it was our pleasure to honor another 4, and those were Gil Hickman, Barbara Kellerman, and posthumously, Robert Greenleaf and Helen Aston. This year, another 4 individuals will be inducted into the ILA Virtual Hall of Fame with the Lifetime Achievement Award. 2 will be honored this morning and 2 tomorrow. And I would like to first start with Alan Bryman, who is an emeritus professor, School of Management at University of Leicester. Alan Bryman was one of the foremost experts on methodology, publishing numerous textbooks on the subject, including Social Research Methods and the Sage Handbook of Organizational Research Methods. A proponent of mixed methods research, Alan encouraged researchers to consider the range of possibilities, which is so much like the ILA, rather than sticking with either quantitative or qualitative methods. In addition to his numerous publications in the field, including co-editing the Sage Handbook of Leadership, Alan is perhaps best known for his internationally acclaimed book, The Disneyization of Society, where he talks about Disney and how much it has impacted the culture of the world. That book was a critical turn in leadership studies, because the book is a significant work on the intersections of modern consumer culture and organizational culture. A mentee of his, Brad Jackson, an ILA member, wrote to me about Alan, and he said, I quote, "Alan was a true gentleman, leadership scholar. He was kind, modest, thoughtful, and always keen to see and appreciate another's point of view. Indeed, he was the antithesis of the charismatic leaders he did such a fine job of observing. Alan's charisma was rooted in the cause of creating leadership scholarship of the highest quality that would stand the test of time. Because of his unfailing commitment to this cause, Alan has left with us a fine body of work that will continue to enlighten and inform for many years to come," end quote. When I notified Alan of the award in January, he was so excited that he immediately booked his train to the conference. In his email, he had said, and I quote, "What a great honor. It is wonderful to be recognized by my peers and to be inducted along with Robert Lord. I'm a big admirer of his work," end quote. Again, here's Alan talking about others and acknowledging others. And sadly, Alan passed away this July. But we were able in April to present him with the award. And so now I would like for all of you to please join me in acknowledging Alan Bryman for his work in the field of leadership with the Lifetime Achievement Award. Now it is my pleasure to honor Stella Nkomo. Stella, would you please come to the stage? Now you have to stand here as I talk about you, if that's okay. Right. Stella Nkomo is a professor in the Department of Human Resource Management at the University of Pretoria and the president of the African Academy of Management. Through her work with the African Academy of Management, Stella has quite literally put African leadership and management practices on the map. Recognizing that Africa's growing economies and emerging markets were centers of innovative leadership practice in dynamic, turbulent environments, Stella knew the time was right for the community of African management scholars to emerge and support research into and the documentation of and dissemination of these practices. Stella is a noted scholar Stella is a noted scholar and consultant in the areas of leadership and change, diversified workforces, and in women and leadership. She's the author of several books and numerous refereed articles, including the acclaimed Our Separate Ways, Black and White Women and the Struggle for Professional Identity, and another, Courageous Conversations, a collection of interviews and reflections on responsible leadership by South African captains of industry. She has been honored for her career contributions in leadership, higher education in South Africa, and for her work in developing young African academics. So,
wow.
There we go. Stella.
Beautiful.
On behalf. All right, well, let me go. Okay. I have to officially induct you now.
Okay.
So, on behalf of the ILA and the Legacy Committee, it is our honor to induct you into the ILA Virtual Hall of Fame as a luminary of the leadership profession with the ILA Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, this is overwhelming. Thank you, Cynthia, for those kind words. I've been given a couple of minutes to speak, and I'm almost speechless. I'd like to thank the International Association for this unbelievable recognition. It brings great joy because I did not expect it. When I got the letter, it was a great surprise to me. I am humbled that to be part of such an extraordinary group of legacy honorees. And I especially like to congratulate my fellow winners this year, Alan Bryman, Robert Lord, and James Mendel. But I thought I would take this time just to send out a message to particularly doctoral students and young scholars. When I was working as a doctoral student and working on my research, I was told that to get tenure and promotion, that I should stick to safe topics, mainstream topics, and to stay away from messy topics like race, gender, and diversity. And so the work I have done the last 35 years, half of it in the USA, the other half now in South Africa and Africa, has taught me the contrary. And that is the message I would like to give to young scholars. And that is the message I'm giving to young scholars in Africa. Pursue. What brought me here today is not the functionalist research that I was taught. It was not using research skills, looking for little gaps in knowledge to write an article in a journal that perhaps nobody reads. I'm not saying they don't have value. But to pursue what is important. And what is important is making a difference and making a contribution. So I would say to all of us that transformative change happens because of committed people who do research and practice because they want to make a better world and better leaders. That is what it's all about. And just in terms of the theme of the conference, I was thinking about this. In fact, I'm editing a special issue of a journal, and we talked about the need for theories in the area of race, gender, and diversity for this critical juncture in time that we find ourselves in. I believe we're at a critical juncture. One path takes us down the road to division, hatred, and inequality. But there's another path that can take us to inclusiveness, equality, and justice. And I hope that everyone here today, and I know you will, that we choose the path for justice and equality. We should resist feeling defeated by these voices because I do believe collectively we can be the force for change. And this award only strengthens my commitment for using my voice for change, and I will continue to do that as long as I live. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. The Distinguished Leadership Award is given to an individual or group whose leadership is exemplary and whose contributions to the practice of leadership are significant. The awardee's impact transcends boundaries, promotes excellence, diversity, and inclusion. The person or group who receives this award are those who serve as an inspiring examples to all who labor to make positive change in the world for the greater good of the global community. This award is not given out every year. The first recipient, as you can see, was John Lewis, the civil rights activist. Since then, other awardees have included Václav Havel, Ambassador James Joseph, and after 9/11, the New York Fire Department. Today, it is our honor to present the award this year to the former Prime Minister of Greece, George Papandreou. George A. Papandreou, a longtime public servant and the Prime Minister of Greece from 2009 to 2011, understands leading in turbulent times. As Minister of Foreign Affairs in 1999, George spearheaded the Greek-Turkish rapprochement. He was elected as Prime Minister after the devastation of the global financial crisis of 2007-2008. Challenged by time and global financial markets, he made the difficult decision to implement austerity programs and cuts to appease the Eurozone. For his work in 2010 of, quote, making the best of Greece's worst year, end quote, Foreign Policy magazine named him a top 100 global thinker. His experiences on the front lines of the Eurozone crisis provide an important lens for understanding Europe today and the continuing struggle globally to build inclusive, humane economies. Currently, as president of the Socialist International, George continues to work on globalizing democratic institutions to meet the global economic challenges that impede a fairer, more just world. Ron Heifetz, a colleague and a friend of George, sent me a note as his great distinct pleasure that George is receiving this award. And in his letter, he said, and I quote, "As Prime Minister, Papandreou led not only his country in courageously facing up to the challenges uncovered by the global financial crisis, but also led Europe to develop new institutional capacity and resilience." When you look through George's bio, what you will see is at least 2 pages of awards. Some of those being in the US and Washington, he's received an award for being the defender of democracy. He's also received the Jackie Robinson Humanitarian Award. The Vatican, he's received the Grand Cross of the Order of Pius IX. For the East-West Institute, the Peace Building Award. And since we're in Belgium, he received the Grand Cross of the Order of the Crown. And for that reason, but for so many, and because of being a good colleague and ambassador of our work and modeling our work, it is our distinct pleasure to honor George A. Papandreou. If you would please join me on the stage.
Three times we're in Belgium.
3 times we're in Belgium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's important for us to see what is written on the award. So if we could have the slide, I would like to read, because I think this is important. Whereas this award will be given to an individual or group whose leadership is exemplary and whose contributions to the practice of leadership are significant. Whereas George A. Papandreou's leadership in the peace process with Turkey and the Greek economic crisis serves as an inspiring example to all who labor to make positive change in the world and seek to advance leadership for the greater good of the global community. Please join me again in acknowledging George A. Papandreou.
Thank you. Well, I'm deeply honored for this award, and I've listening to the awards that I have had in the past. This one is particularly important at this time in this world. So I'm particularly humbled because when I was at the helm of Greece facing bankruptcy, I said, we have begun an odyssey in uncharted waters, not knowing what dangers or opportunities we may face. The wrath of Cyclops, called the global markets, the temptations of sirens for easy solutions, the catastrophic possibilities of accidents and cyclones on the path like a crashing bank. And I could not have steered through this crisis without real friends, and often it feels quite lonely at the helm. Amongst the international leaders who were bold friends was Herman von Rompuy, who's with us today. Herman, you believed in Greece, respected our efforts, and helped steer Europe through these difficult straits. I thank you dearly. Dear friends, we are living a paradox in our times. We have created a unique, interconnected, complex global village. Yet we're at bay on how we manage complexity. We have created tools that can disrupt dictatorships or corporations at lightning speed, yet there's no button we can touch to construct anew. We have godlike technological power, multiplying exponentially, yet we're challenged on how are we using it. The ancient Greek gods would tell us this is the moral dilemma, and it is nothing new. They would warn us of hubris. Aristotle had said Papandreou, or everything changes. But the extent of flux, volatility, fragility is unprecedented. The only constant today seems to be that everything is changing, and at incredible speed. So now more than ever, I realize the wisdom of my good friend Ron Heifetz, who would say no easy quick fixes, no simple technical solutions. And it is fruitless, even dangerous, to wait for or anoint a savior. So what can leaders do in these turbulent times? Believe in the capacity of our communities. We, the people, do have the capacity to collectively imagine a better world and shape it together. Together, inclusively, responsibly. Empowering. This is the true meaning of what politics should be, a compass for a leader, a moral purpose and imperative. More so now than we are challenged in this complex world with difficult issues such as inequality, injustices, insecurity as technology and globalization bring radical change, turbulence as the new norm. But I'm very worried, as I'm sure many of you, of all those who profess strong leadership but play on people's emotions to divide society, denying people's potential, scapegoating, building walls, fueling messianic and false hopes, feeding us with poison of mistrust, hate and fear, racism, penalizing difference rather than nourishing empathy and love. This is neither strong leadership nor is it building healthy societies. Let us not be defeated by these voices, as Stella said just earlier. Of the many stories I could recount, let me leave you with one I often use to show a different type of leadership to young leaders from the wider Mediterranean region I bring together every summer for training. I had begun a dialogue with Ismail Cem, my Turkish counterpart, trying to bridge the gaps of hate and fear between Turkey and Greece, perennial foes. I received a call from the Greek Cypriot Teachers Union. Cyprus, a divided island with the north occupied by the Turkish army. The Greek Cypriot teachers had begun contacts with their Turkish Cypriot counterparts across the dividing line. A bold move. A young Greek Cypriot boy had leukemia. No one could find a DNA match for a marrow transplant. They had a wild idea. Maybe someone on the Turkish Cypriot side might match. I called Ismail. Let's give the green light to search. We did. Lo and behold, they found a match. A Turkish Cypriot young boy. He gave his bone marrow to the young Greek Cypriot, and the transplant became a reality. Lessons. First, they took the initiative. We simply gave the space. the trust. Second, when we trust, empower human potential. People surprise us. They exceed our wildest expectations. Third, a divided society. Greeks, Turks, Christians, Muslims, but shared DNA. Our differences are socially constructed, not inevitable. If we construct these conflicts, we can also reconstruct on shared values for shared societies, so important in our interconnected world. Trust in people's potential. I could not have saved Greece from bankruptcy were it not for the strength of the Greek people and their sacrifices. When I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, little or nothing would have been accomplished if it were not for what I called people's diplomacy. The women of Palestine and Israel marching together into the desert are possibly the only hope to make a difference for peace today. It is they and all the brave citizens fighting for a better world that deserve, and I dedicate this award to. Leading today may seem very much like walking in a desert without a compass. But if we build trust in our societies, collective learning, capacity to invent, empathize, share, we will have the best compass possible to humanize globalization as we ride the waves of a turbulent world. My sincere thanks for this award.
Thank you, Mr. Papandreou. I hope that the words of peace that you spoke will resonate from Washington to the Kremlin and all over the globe, because I think you have lived those words. Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Herman van Rompuy. Mr. van Rompuy's impressive career in politics includes his role as the first full-time president of the European Council and being Prime Minister of Belgium. He is currently the president of the European Policy Center, an independent think tank dedicated to fostering European integration. Prior to his ascension to Belgian Prime Minister, Van Rompuy was well known for his ability to broker peaceful solutions to intractable disagreements that involved compromise from all parties involved. This skill, combined with his political expertise and his background in philosophy and economics, served him well as President of the European Council, where he led through integration issues ranging from cultural to financial. A complex Renaissance thinker he is, a published and award-winning poet, well known for his haikus, and I don't know whether I pronounced the word right, Mr. Van Rompuy, but I'm sure you will correct me later on. An art form perfect for today's busy and complex world in its ability to inspire meditative thought arising from its seeming simplicity. He's also a speaker on TEDx, and he did that in Leuven. Can the European Union achieve utopia? Van Rompuy received, just like Mr. Papandreou, numerous awards, honors and honorary degrees. In 2012, he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the European Union, together with José Manuel Barroso and Martin Schulz. Today, Mr. Van Rompuy will share his thoughts under the intriguing and hopeful theme, Europe, Reasons to be More Hopeful. I would like to remind you all that Mr. Van Rompuy will speak here under the Chatham rules, so what is being spoken in this room will stay here and not be quoted outside. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Van Rompuy.
Madam Chairman, Mr. Prime Minister and dear friend George, ladies and gentlemen. The title of my speech is The Future of Europe. The good news is already Europe has a future. According to some observers, it was not so obvious a few months ago. I myself had never doubts, but what brought the change in perception? I will give you a number of reasons. The first one is the economic situation improved dramatically in terms of economic growth and in terms of employment. It is not a gift from heaven, but the result of efforts made at the national and the European level. I know leaders, and George Papandreou is one of them, who were aware that by taking unpopular measures, there was a chance they would not be re-elected. And some of our colleagues were not even a candidate anymore at the next elections. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, political courage and leadership exists. On average, I come back to economics, on average, GDP growth all over Europe, on average, is now coming to 2%. We are doing better even than the United States in 2016, 17, and 18. The US recovered more rapidly after the banking crisis. We are now catching up. We are creating in the Eurozone since 2014 7 million jobs, 9 million jobs in the European Union as a whole. If you had said this a few years ago, nobody would have believed you. Although citizens, and especially voters, are not guided solely by the economy, I recall the famous word of Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. So they are not guided anymore only by economy. The German elections are an evidence of this statement. The second good news, and as I said, there is good news. I apologize because I bring also good news. I know it is not politically correct anymore. The threat of political instability in major countries as France, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, Austria disappeared. We won a battle, we have not won the war yet. Italy is still a question mark, but the support for the euro remains strong all over Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, populism is the opposite of leadership. There is never courage by populist leaders. Populists want only to become or to remain popular. So we have to tackle also from our sides the structural problems in our society and our economies, because those problems are not over. But there is now a window of opportunity to tackle the deep-rooted problems related to security, to fairness, to structural handicaps in our economies and in the job market. This window is small in terms of size and in terms of length. If we are not successful, in 4 or 5 years' time, populists can come back again and win the war. So we have to work hard and to benefit from this window of opportunity. Another point that shows that there is political leadership and courage in Europe is that, of course, the situation in the Middle East has impacted, or is still impacting us via migration and terrorism. The refugee crisis in 2014 and 2015 and 2016 failed to destabilize Europe thanks to the EU-Turkey deal. We overcame this existential crisis as we did in 2010, 2013 with the crisis of the Eurozone. these were not just problematic years. It was about the survival of the Eurozone and thus the survival of the European Union, the biggest peace project ever in European history. So a lot was at stake. And in the refugee crisis, leaders tried to combine two contradictory things. Ethical idealism, symbolized by the German Chancellor and others, and political realism, a very difficult exercise. But even if they had to choose at the end for more realism, they never used, those leaders, a polarizing language. They didn't consider refugees as potential terrorists or criminals, but as human beings. And that makes a lot of difference for the general climate in our societies. Of course, we have to tackle the deep-rooted problems of migration in Africa and the Middle East, and those problems are not solved. It is the responsibility of the regions themselves, the Arab and our African countries, and of all global players. My third reason, and I apologize is a strong word, to our American friends, Europeans are looking at the American president with a feeling of unease and anxiety. I'm very well known for my diplomacy. The polarizing rhetoric, the zigzag course, and the aggressiveness are strengthening the European Union, ladies and gentlemen, as a haven of stability and security. Another point is, and it's a sad thing, Brexit is a sad thing, because leaving the European Union was not in our program. We considered the European Union as an irreversible peace project. So when a country, and a big country as the UK is leaving us, this is a political amputation of the first degree. But for all the other countries, what was their reaction? Their reaction was that leaving the EU is not an issue for all the rest. Brexit is a unique movement. All the others were sticking to the European Union and even believing more in the project. Why? Because an exit would add instability to an already existing feeling of instability inside each of our countries. May I add another consideration? Real leadership is telling the truth to the citizens. Using feelings of fear, of anger and hate is the opposite, just the opposite of responsibility. And responsibility is the main characteristic for leadership. Brexit brought the 27 even more together. They could easily agree on the guidelines for the negotiations with Great Britain, and important progress was made in the field of European defense among the 27. We agreed rapidly on a common negotiating stance. It was a surprise for our British friends. We surprised ourselves too. We were not aware that we were capable to unite so quickly. All those elements contributed to changing the general climate in Europe. But I have to admit, more with the elites than among citizens. But still, it's still remarkable. This positive mode has to be used to strengthen the European Union and the economic and monetary union. And that's my second point. Deepening the European project has to be seen in a very specific context. France and Germany are ready to take the lead again in the relaunch of the European project. They represent not only half of the economy of the Eurozone, but also two key values: solidarity and responsibility. There is no compromise possible in Europe and elsewhere in the world without a combination of those two values, solidarity and responsibility. And in good old Europe, Germany is more representative for this value of this feeling of responsibility, putting your house in order, having fiscal discipline, raising competitiveness. In the southern part of Europe, and France understands this better than any other country, it is about solidarity. When you are in trouble, of course you have to take your responsibilities, but you are entitled to receive an answer from the others, what is called solidarity. A balance found between France and Germany, between solidarity and responsibility, is a template for many other countries, especially in the socio-economic field. And so we are lucky that we have now at the helm of France and Europe two really pro-European leaders. There was a French election campaign, a very rude campaign, very tough language was used. And at the end, there was a debate, as you have also in the United States, but a debate between the main contenders. It was the future President Emmanuel Macron and then the leader of the main opposition party, Madame Le Pen. Dear friends, it was a clash of civilizations. It was a clash between two sets of values, two visions on man and society. And the future president won that battle. He was elected with a 2/3 majority. And now we have to use that political capital in Europe to relaunch the European project. As I said, the second element in the context in which we have to work on the relaunching of the European project is, unfortunately, Brexit. I deliberately use the word, it's a political amputation for the Union. But those who are not Europeans have to realize that the UK didn't belong to the core of the Union. Whilst it was not a member of two pillars of the Union, the Eurozone, a common currency, and the Schengen area, a passport-free zone in Europe. So they were not belonging to the core, but it's still an important country of the European Union. Britain was part of all our wars, so Britain has to be part of the peace project, which the European Union still is. I will not bother you with all kinds of reflections on the way where the negotiations are conducted, and I hope that it will be a successful negotiation so that if Britain has to leave, it is a process that brings us closer together at the end and that installs some kind of lasting relationship between the EU 27 and the UK. May I add, because we speak about leadership, may I add a consideration about referenda specifically. Personally, I am not impressed by the use of referenda. A lot depends on the formulation of the question. The surrounding political circumstances are as important as the topic of the referendum itself. It gives the impression that it's democratic. Often, it's about the popularity of the leaders who posed the question instead of the popularity of the team. In referenda, you often get answers on questions that were never asked in the first place. So I'm not a strong believer in all this, but unfortunately, we have, once that a referendum took place in a legal and constitutional way, we have to respect the outcome of that referendum. So we will relaunch the European project in this specific context, in the context of Brexit, in the context of a much better German-French understanding. A relaunch of the European project has more to do with re-energizing than with reinventing or rebuilding. We need reforms in the Union. We will not reform the Union now. But without political will, nothing is possible. The exercise cannot be restricted to general principles. The real political will has to be present in concrete measures and initiatives and their rapid implementation. Dear friends, and George knows all this also, you feel always in the beginning of a negotiation if there is really the will to convene, the will to compromise. I know it's a commonplace, but where is a will is a way. That's still true in politics and elsewhere. So it depends on leadership, on the strong determination to compromise and to find an agreement. I will not say that all the rest is a detail. The devil is always in the detail. But without this political will, nothing is possible. And when we overcame the survival crisis, the existential crisis of the Eurozone, and even of the refugee crisis. But I lived in this specific period at the helm of the European Council of leaders of government and of state. So I know the Eurozone crisis better than the second crisis, the refugee crisis. Without the will to overcome the problems, without a strong European belief, knowing that if we failed, it was not only about a currency, it was not only about an economy, but we were playing then with the legacy of the founding fathers of the European Union. So, if there was not around the table this strong political will, this conviction that we have to keep the European Union not only alive, but also kicking, nothing would have been achieved. So ideas and character are key in overcoming major crises. But what should be the content of a new European program? In my view, it has to be focused on prosperity, on security, and on fairness. If we want to beat populism, we have to recreate prosperity for all and more jobs. We have to recreate security. We have to recreate security, beating terrorism, finding ways for legal migration. And the third issue is as important as the two others. It's about fairness. And speaking about prosperity, we all need a higher economic growth even than what the Eurozone is achieving last year, this year, and next year, around 2% a year, in order to face the growing costs of the aging of our population. GDP growth, as you know, is the sum of the increase of the labor force, the hours worked, and of productivity. The latter, productivity, depends on investment. Investment of physical, of human, and of financial capital. So therefore, private and public investment is key. Improving the business climate is a task of the member states. But it's much more than just about tax. Investment is more than just decreasing corporate taxes. By the way, the tax competition going on all over the world will relocate investment instead of boosting investment. We need innovation, entrepreneurship, venture capital, research and development, education, in skills in order to raise competitiveness at the European level. Much has to be done at the level of the member states, but at the level of the Union, we have also tools to give a boost to strategic investment. But again, the non-Europeans will be less familiar with all the initiatives we took or we are taking. In this chapter of prosperity and jobs, structural reforms in the labor market is a competence of the member states. As a general line, they have to strike a balance between flexibility and stability. Some of our member states are too rigid, so they cannot create enough new jobs, and others are too flexible. The so-called Anglo-Saxon model creates deep social malaise and political unrest, whilst formally achieving full employment. A declining of wages in national income is a clear warning shot for this evolution. We are in Europe often too rigid, but in other countries in the Western world, they are too flexible. And even if you have then full employment, you're creating a deep social malaise. Legal migration, and I mean legal migration coming from outside the European Union, especially of skilled people, is unavoidable in a growing economy with an aging and decreasing labor force. But more massive illegal migration will undermine the public support for the so much needed legal migration. This also will become a big issue in the years to come. On this chapter of prosperity, the European Union is a promoter worldwide of free trade and will go on with free trade agreements, even if there are doubts and even opposition in our society. This is also a dimension of leadership. The latest example is the EU-Japan Free Trade Agreement, the biggest free trade agreement ever concluded by the European Union. Actually, the European Union has free trade agreements with almost all the partners of the former Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was dropped by the American president on his first day in office. We have FTAs with all those countries, with Peru, with Colombia, with Mexico, with Canada, with Japan, with South Korea, with Singapore. We are negotiating with Indonesia. We have finalized with Vietnam. So we don't give up. Protectionism can only be avoided in case of a free and fair trade. And so the European Union also has to protect our economy against disloyal practices, which is different from protectionism. Protecting people, protecting our economies against disloyal practices is something completely different compared to outright protectionism. Again, in this chapter of prosperity, the euro and economic and monetary union have to remain an anchor of stability and of political coherence. The support for the common currency is stronger than ever in all of our member states, even in Greece, in the midst of the crisis of the Eurozone. And after having suffered a lot, the Greek people were very supportive for remaining in the Eurozone. And the same is happening in a lot of countries. Even in France, the far right is now acknowledging that leaving the European Union and leaving the Eurozone is no option at all. People want to remain in the Union and in the Eurozone. So they are changing their language. As I said, a populist always wants to remain popular. And if Europe is gaining in popularity, they also change their mind. In Italy, even, a populist party tried to join the most pro-European party of group in the European Parliament. It failed, but let's say this attempt was already very telling in itself. The architecture of the Eurozone was strengthened during the years 2010-2013. It was not only about crisis management, but the Union is not, the Eurozone is not solid enough to face another crisis in the future. And another crisis will happen. We just don't know when, and we don't know what kind of crisis. But it will happen sooner or later. And therefore, we have to strengthen the banking union, the economic union, the fiscal union. It has to be completed. The ways to achieve this is described in many reports made by myself and by my colleagues and by the European Commission. So we know what to do. The only thing is that we have to do it. But we are fully aware what we needed to complete the economic and monetary union. But each step, even a small one, in deepening the economic and monetary union necessitates an overcoming of taboos. And I give you just two of them. A transfer of sovereignty. And for a sovereign country, it's always difficult. They already gave up the monetary sovereignty. Imagine that the United States gives up the US dollar, just to give you an idea. Germany gave up the Deutschmark, which was the most stable currency in the world. But they did it because they believed that this was a way to achieve greater European integration. So we have each step that we take in overcoming the economic, or in completion of the economic and monetary union, each step we take needs an overcoming of taboos, transfer of sovereignty, and, for instance, more solidarity. Again, it is a matter of political will and of political courage and of leadership. And I hope that it will still be there even after the German elections. As I said, solidarity and responsibility have to go hand in hand in the same way as risk sharing and risk reducing. As always in the Union, the completion of the economic and monetary union will be done stepwise. But the first step has to be substantial and rapidly implemented. Postponing will lack credibility. My second chapter is about security. Due to my time constraint, I will not go into that topic. But here also, the Schengen area, the passport-free zone in Europe, is a pillar of the Union. It's not just an element of the Union, it's a pillar of the Union. It was built for normal times, not for facing huge refugee flows and huge economic migration, mainly coming from Africa. So in this crisis, the crisis of the refugee crisis, the survival of the Schengen area was at stake, and some were pleading for dropping the Schengen area because there are no border controls anymore inside the Schengen area. So let's drop it so that we can combat much more easily the refugee flows. We maintained, even in the midst of that crisis, we maintained the Schengen area, which was also a very strong evidence of political will and leadership. My third point, and it will be a short one, not because it is less important, is about fairness. Inequality is growing among our member states and in our member states due to the high levels of unemployment, and to a discrepancy between the growth of wages and the growth of productivity. This phenomenon is not as dramatic as at the other side of the Atlantic, but inequality is a growing source of populism alongside others, and others I mean, for instance, illegal migration. The EU as such can contribute to fairness by combating international tax fraud and evasion, what we are doing, by fighting against other kinds of dumping, social dumping and commercial dumping, by tackling discrimination between small and medium-sized enterprise and big multinational corporations, which the European Commission is doing, imposing fines on major multinational corporations. For combating tax fraud and tax evasion and others, a country in a standalone has no impact on international and global evolutions. Only a bloc such as the European Union has enough leverage to correct market distortions. So the answer to more prosperity, more security, more fairness, the answer is not less Europe. The answer is more Europe, because for combating them in a globalized world, we need instruments at a higher level than just the level of the member states. Ladies and gentlemen, Those three objectives have to be pursued in a context wherein the European values, such as political democracy, the rule of law, fundamental freedoms, and non-discrimination, are respected also within our union. And we have a problem. In some of our countries, those values are under pressure. It will be a major theme in the upcoming months. It has to be a common concern and responsibility of all the member states, and not only of the European Commission, which is the guardian of the treaties. The Union is based on values, as is the United States. In times of uncertainty, this is even more important. The European Union has to be consistent. We were never closer than today to take action to defend our values within the European Union. And let me add some thoughts, but again, not too long, on democracy, because there's much more at stake in these days than just our economies. Our democracies, how to strengthen them. The first condition is to learn democratic habits. But dialogue, moderation, my God, I love that word, moderation. Moderation and conversation necessitates a deep respect for every human being. Without the conception of a person, of consideration of each person, nothing will be delivered. Democracy is not a technique. Democracy is a philosophy. Democracy cannot survive without a strong civil society, without intermediate associations, where people get used to living and talking with each other. I recall the speech of your chairwoman at the beginning of this meeting. A compromise is prepared in a society, not only the level of politics. Democracy cannot be maintained in a climate of polarization or hate. The language, the rhetoric of leaders are as important as their deeds. Words can split a society. A democracy needs also social cohesion and social trust. Without protection, and I spoke about protection against negative evolutions in our society, protection against unemployment, insecure jobs, massive illegal migration, terrorism, climate change, social, commercial, and tax dumping, huge inequalities. Without protection against these threats, democracy is missing a soul, a purpose. An implosion can be the final result. Democracy does not mean chaos, but change. And even movability is part of the game. Democracy is not static, but dynamic, sometimes too dynamic. We have to convince people each time. I will put it in a more poetical way, not in a haiku, in a more poetical way. In the land where leaders think they are always right, flowers will not flourish in the spring. That land is gray and dull, and winter is the only season. So I am, of course, as many of us, a strong believer in democracy, and we have to be very careful that we keep those values high on our political agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the three objectives, prosperity, security, and fairness, are part of a more global strategy of creating a balance between openness and protection. We need that balance. How to keep our societies, our democracies, our economies open whilst protecting people better against threatening evolutions, and I just mentioned them. We have to create this, what I can call a corrected openness, keeping societies, economies, and democracies open, but with huge corrections. As we installed in the past social and ecological corrections to the national market economies. But this isn't possible anymore only at a national basis. If we want to have this new balance between openness and protection, we need to work at a higher level. The countervailing power to global and European markets has to be global and European. More Europe is not an ideological choice, but a necessity. I put it in another way, this balance between openness and protection. A clash between cosmopolites and identity supporters leads to polarization, instability, and chaos. We have to bridge the cleavage between web people, most of you are web people, and wall people, building walls in their hearts, building walls in their heads, even building physical walls. Between movers and stayers at home, between citizens from nowhere and citizens from somewhere. We have to bridge the gap, those who believe in the space, the global world, Europe, and those who are longing for a place where they are at ease and at home, where they feel protected. We shouldn't make a choice between space and place. We have to bridge the gap between both of them. This rebalancing is a joint effort to be made by the member states and by the European Union. Splendid isolation is not splendid anymore. It means powerlessness. So the new European program that ignores this need for a bigger picture will miss its goal. It has to embody, this new European program, a strategy or a philosophy. Just agreeing on a catalogue of technocratic measures will miss the key point. We need that kind of inspiration that I just described. The European Union, the 27, showed its unity in the Brexit case, but it has to be guided by the same spirit in a positive project on which depends its future. And as far as I'm and many friends here in the room is concerned, our future, our European Union. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the ILA with presenting you the ILA Globe, and I hope that your words of wisdom will flow over the globe through the whole audience that we have here. And personally, I would like to tell you that I feel very proud of being a European. Thank you very much. Thank you. So now it's time for coffee. We'll have a break of 30 minutes. But Bridget, do we still have 30 minutes? No? But there is coffee. So you have to be at your programs at 10:45, because then it starts. Look on your app or in your brochure where you're going to. Enjoy the coffee and be sure to be in time. Thank you very much.